I counted 18 times my kids interrupted me while I was reading my husband's will. They smirked, talked over me, and glanced at each other like I wasn't even there. Days later, I hit record as the lawyer walked in. When the tape played, the room fell silent as their own words echoed back. Mom's too stupid to understand legal documents anyway. But what made their faces turn white wasn't just hearing their contempt. It was realizing I'd been recording everything for weeks. My name is Edna, and for 43 years, I thought I had built the perfect family with my husband, Robert. We raised 3 children in our colonial home in Hartford, Connecticut: James, our eldest at 41, Martha at 39, and David at 37. Each Sunday, our dining room table would overflow with grandchildren laughter and my homemade pot roast. Robert would sit at the head of the table, his eyes twinkling as he watched our family grow. But cancer has a way of stripping away facades faster than anything else I know. When Robert was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last spring, our perfect family portrait began showing its cracks. At first, the changes were subtle. James, who worked as a financial advisor downtown, suddenly became very interested in helping with Dad's affairs. Martha, normally too busy with her real estate business to visit more than once a month, started dropping by 3 times a week. And David, who hadn't asked about our finances in his entire adult life, began questioning every medical decision, every treatment option, always with an eye on the cost. I told myself they were just worried about their father. When you've been married as long as Robert and I had been, you learn to see the best in people, especially your own children. I focused on caring for Robert, managing his medications, driving him to chemotherapy, holding his hand through the long nights when the pain kept him awake. Robert noticed the changes too. One evening after James had spent 2 hours going through our investment portfolios just to help out, Robert squeezed my hand. "Eddie," he said, using the nickname only he called me, "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," I whispered, adjusting his pillows. "When I'm gone, don't let them push you around. You're stronger than they think you are." I smiled and kissed his forehead, thinking he was worrying about nothing. Our children loved us. They were just concerned about their father's health and wanting to help however they could. 3 weeks before Robert passed, he called his lawyer Richard Brennan to the house. The children weren't invited to this meeting, which caused quite a stir. James showed up anyway, claiming he thought I might need support. Martha called 6 times during the hour-long meeting. David texted constantly asking what was happening. "I've made some changes," Robert told me after Richard left. "Everything is in order. Trust Richard when the time comes." I should have paid more attention to the way he emphasized that last part. Robert died on a Tuesday morning in October. The maple tree outside our bedroom window was brilliant red, just the way he loved it. He passed peacefully, holding my hand, whispering that he loved me one last time. For a moment in my grief, I forgot about the strange behavior of our children. I forgot about the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. I forgot about the way they'd been inventorying our possessions with their eyes. But they didn't let me forget for long. The funeral was beautiful, exactly as Robert would have wanted. The church was packed with colleagues from his 35 years at the insurance company, neighbors who'd known us since we'd moved to the neighborhood, and friends from the country club. My children gave touching eulogies. James spoke about his father's business wisdom. Martha shared memories of father-daughter dances. David talked about baseball games and fishing trips. They played their parts perfectly. It was after the reception, when the last guest had left, and we were back at the house, that the masks began to slip. I was in the kitchen washing dishes because it gave me something to do with my hands when I heard them in the dining room. "We need to talk about the will reading," James was saying. "Mom's not in any state to handle this alone." "She's never handled money," Martha added. Dad did everything. We should probably start looking into assisted living places, David chimed in. This house is too big for her now. I stood there, my hands in soapy water, feeling like I'd been slapped. Assisted living, I was 68 years old, not 88. I played tennis twice a week. I volunteered at the library. I had just nursed my husband through cancer while maintaining our home and our lives. But I said nothing. Robert's words echoed in my mind. Don't let them push you around. I dried my hands and walked into the dining room. The will reading is next week, I said calmly. Richard already called to schedule it. They exchanged glances, the kind of looks that siblings perfect over decades of conspiracy. We'll all be there, of course, James said, not asking, but telling. Of course, I replied, my voice steady despite the grief and growing anger churning inside me. That night I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house, touching Robert's things, smelling his cologne, missing him with an ache that felt physical. But underneath the grief, something else was growing. A realization that perhaps I hadn't known my children as well as I thought I did. I found myself in Robert's study, sitting in his leather chair. His laptop was still on the desk. I knew his password. We'd never had secrets from each other. I opened it, not sure what I was looking for, until I found a folder labeled, "For Eddie, Important." Inside were 3 documents. The first was a love letter that made me cry fresh tears. The second was a detailed list of all our assets, accounts, and important information. The third made my blood run cold. It was a document titled Concerns, dated just a month before his diagnosis. In it, Robert had detailed instances where each of our children had asked for money, made comments about inheritance, or shown what he called troubling entitlement. There was James, who had been pushing for us to invest in his risky business ventures. Martha, who had suggested we put her name on the house deed for tax purposes. David, who had been caught looking through our financial documents during Thanksgiving. At the bottom, Robert had written, "I pray I'm wrong about this, but if I'm not, I've made arrangements. Trust Richard. Trust yourself. You're stronger than they know." I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows. Inside, my heart was hardening into something I didn't quite recognize yet. But I would soon learn its name: determination. The will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday. I had 1 week to prepare, 1 week to watch, 1 week to understand who my children really were. And more importantly, 1 week to decide what I was going to do about it. The 7 days between Robert's funeral and the will reading revealed more about my children than the previous 4 decades combined. It started the very next morning when I found Martha in my bedroom at 6:30 going through Robert's closet. "Oh, Mom," she said, not even looking guilty. "I didn't want to wake you. I was just thinking we should start sorting Dad's things. No point in letting them just hang here." I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, watching my daughter rifle through her father's suits like she was at a clearance sale. "Martha, your father has been gone for exactly 3 days. She waved her hand dismissively. "I know it's hard, but keeping busy helps with grief. Trust me, I've been through this with 3 house sales where the owner passed. The sooner you start, the easier it is." House sales. She was comparing her father to her real estate transactions. "Please leave," I said quietly. "Mom, don't be emotional about this. Some of these suits are worth good money. James could use them for work, or we could donate them and get the tax write-off." "Martha, get out of my bedroom." She must have heard something in my voice because she actually stopped pawing through the closet. "Fine, but we're going to have to deal with this eventually. The house, the cars, all of it. You can't manage all this alone." After she left, I sat on the bed Robert and I had shared for so many years. His pillow still smelled like him. I held it close and made a decision. They wanted to see me as a weak, grieving widow, fine. I would give them exactly what they expected to see. But I would also do something else. I went to the electronics store that afternoon. The young clerk was kind and patient as I explained what I needed. Something small, I said. Something that can record conversations clearly. He showed me several options and I chose 3 different devices. One looked like a pen. Another was a tiny device that could clip inside a pocket or purse. The third was an app for my phone that could record with the screen off. Planning to catch someone? He asked with a smile. Just want to preserve some memories, I lied smoothly. Family stories and such. That evening, James arrived with a briefcase and a folder thick with papers. Mom, we need to talk about Dad's portfolio, he announced, spreading documents across the dining room table without asking. I've been reviewing everything and there are some immediate changes we need to make. I made tea while he talked, the recording pen in my pocket, capturing every word. Dad was way too conservative with his investments, James was saying. At your age, we need to be more aggressive to maximize returns. I've already talked to my broker about transferring everything to accounts I can manage for you. That's thoughtful of you, I said, setting down his tea. But I think I'll wait until after the will reading to make any changes. His face darkened. Mom, the market doesn't wait. Every day we delay is money lost. You have to trust me on this. I do this for a living. I know you do, sweetheart, but your father asked me to wait for Richard's guidance. Richard Brennan is an estate lawyer, not a financial advisor. What does he know about portfolio management? I sipped my tea and gave him the vacant, confused look he seemed to expect. I suppose you're right. It's all so overwhelming. Maybe after the will reading you can explain it all again. He gathered his papers with poorly concealed frustration. Fine, but don't blame me when you've lost thousands in potential gains. After he left, I listened to the recording. Clear as day, I could hear the contempt in his voice. When had my son started seeing me as an obstacle to his financial ambitions? The next day brought David along with his wife, Sarah. They arrived with a real estate agent in tow. Mom, David said, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. This is Barbara Chen from Coldwell Banker. She specializes in senior transitions. I kept my face pleasantly confused. Senior transitions. Barbara, a woman with an aggressive handshake and even more aggressive perfume, immediately began touring my home uninvited. Oh, this place has wonderful bones. Original hardwood crown molding. With some updating, we could get top dollar. The market is fantastic right now for properties like this. Sarah chimed in. David and I have been looking at some lovely condos for you, Edna. One-level living, no maintenance, much more appropriate for your situation. My situation? I asked, the tiny recorder in my purse capturing everything. Well, you're alone now, Sarah said, as if explaining to a child. This place is way too big. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2 acres of property. It's too much for you to handle. I watched Barbara measure my living room with her eyes already calculating commissions. I've handled it for 30 years, I said mildly. David put what he probably thought was a comforting hand on my shoulder. With Dad here, sure. But now come on, Mom, be realistic. You can't manage this place alone. The yard work alone, Sarah added, shaking her head. David's already gotten quotes from services. It would cost you $500 a month minimum. They had already gotten quotes. They had already picked out condos. My husband was 4 days in the ground, and they were already dividing up our life. I appreciate your concern, I said, leading them to the door. But I'm not ready to think about moving. Barbara pressed her business card into my hand. When you are ready, call me. David has my number too, just in case you misplace it. Just in case I misplace it. Because obviously I was too senile to keep track of a business card. By Wednesday, the assaults were coming from all sides. Martha brought a contractor to evaluate necessary repairs that would increase the house's value. James had his lawyer friend drop by to discuss estate planning strategies. David and Sarah returned with brochures for active senior communities. Each visit I played my part: the confused widow, the overwhelmed elderly woman, the mother who needed her children's guidance, and each visit my recorders captured their real thoughts when they believed I wasn't listening or was too stupid to understand. She's sitting on at least $2 million in property alone. I heard Martha tell someone on the phone while I was supposedly napping in the next room. Plus Dad's life insurance investments pension. We're talking serious money here and she has no idea what to do with it. Mom's always been clueless about finances. James confided to David when they thought I was in the bathroom. Dad babies her their entire marriage. She probably doesn't even know how to write a check. We need to move fast, David replied, before some charity or scammer gets their hooks into her. You know how vulnerable these old women are after their husbands die. These old women, vulnerable, clueless. I stood in my bathroom looking at my reflection in the mirror. Yes, I had aged. Yes, I was grieving. But the woman looking back at me was the same one who had raised 3 children, managed a household, volunteered for countless organizations, and held her dying husband's hand with strength he'd admired until his last breath. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching the mood as we prepared for the will reading. I dressed carefully in the black suit Robert had always said made me look distinguished. I put fresh batteries in all my recording devices. I was ready. But first there was one more performance to give. I called Martha deliberately, making my voice shaky. Honey, I'm so nervous about today. What if I don't understand what Richard says? All that legal language. Don't worry, Mom, Martha said, her voice sickeningly sweet. We'll all be there to help you understand. Just let us handle the complicated stuff. Perfect. They thought I was scared and dependent. Exactly where I wanted them. As I drove to Richard Brennan's office, I thought about the document Robert had left me. His concerns about our children, his preparations, his faith in my strength. Trust Richard, he'd written. Trust yourself. I pulled into the parking lot of the law office, watching my children's expensive cars already lined up like vultures at a feast. James's BMW, Martha's Mercedes, David's Audi. Success symbols bought with ambition that had apparently extended to coveting their parents' assets before we were even dead. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. In my purse, my recorders were ready. Whatever happened in that room, I would have evidence. Whatever they said, whatever they did, I would be prepared. The rain intensified, drumming against my windshield. I took a deep breath, grabbed my umbrella, and headed inside. Time to find out exactly what Robert had planned. Time to discover just how far my children were willing to go, and time to begin showing them exactly who Edna Patterson really was. Richard Brennan's law office occupied the second floor of a historic building downtown. I climbed the stairs slowly, not from frailty, but to compose myself for what was coming. Behind me, I could hear my children and their spouses thundering up like a herd of elephants, their excitement barely contained. Mom, why didn't you take the elevator? David called out, as if climbing a single flight of stairs was beyond my capabilities. I've been climbing these stairs for 30 years, I replied. Robert and I had been coming to Richard for all our legal needs since the children were young. The reception area was elegant and understated, with leather chairs and law books lining mahogany shelves. My children immediately took over the space, spreading out like they owned it. James was on his phone barking orders at someone about moving meetings. Martha was texting furiously, probably alerting her contractor to stand by. David and Sarah were whispering in the corner, heads bent together like conspirators. Mrs. Patterson, the receptionist Linda greeted me warmly. I'm so sorry for your loss. Mr. Patterson was such a wonderful man. Thank you, dear, I said, appreciating the genuine sympathy in her voice. Edna. Richard emerged from his office, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. He was 75, had been Robert's fraternity brother at Yale, and one of the few people I trusted completely. He embraced me warmly before turning to acknowledge my children with professional courtesy. If everyone's ready, we can proceed to the conference room, he said. The conference room was imposing with a large oak table and windows overlooking downtown Hartford. I took my seat, my purse with its hidden recorders positioned carefully on the table. My children arranged themselves like a tribunal James at what he clearly thought was the power position at the opposite end of the table. Richard settled his papers and looked at each of us in turn. First, let me say how sorry I am for your loss. Robert was not just a client, but a dear friend. He put a great deal of thought into his final wishes. Of course, James interrupted, already impatient. We appreciate that, Richard. If we could just proceed with the reading. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly at the rudeness, but he maintained his professional demeanor. Very well. Let me begin with the basic distributions. He began reading the legal preamble, and I watched my children lean forward like hungry wolves. Sarah actually licked her lips. Martha's fingers drummed impatiently on her phone. None of them were looking at me. To my beloved wife, Edna Marie Patterson. Richard read, and I felt tears prick my eyes at hearing Robert's words. I leave the house at 47 Sycamore Lane, all its contents and the surrounding property to be hers, absolutely and without condition. Well, that's standard, Martha muttered, until she sells it. Richard continued as if she hadn't spoken. Additionally, I leave to my wife my entire investment portfolio, all bank accounts held jointly or in my name alone, my pension benefits, and the proceeds of my life insurance policies. What about the individual bequests? James demanded. Surely Dad set aside specific amounts for his children. Richard looked up from the papers. I'm getting to that, James, if you'll allow me to continue. But James wasn't done. It's just that Dad always said he wanted to take care of all of us. He must have specified percentages or amounts for each child. He did indeed make specific provisions, Richard said carefully. To each of my 3 children, James, Martha, and David, I leave the sum of $50,000. The silence was deafening, then explosive. 50,000, Martha shrieked. That's it, that's all. There must be some mistake, David said, his face flushing red. Dad's estate is worth millions. 50,000 is insulting. James stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. Did Mom put him up to this? Did she manipulate him when he was sick? I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, letting their true colors shine for the recorders. Furthermore, Richard continued, raising his voice above their protests, these bequests come with conditions. Conditions, Sarah spat. What kind of conditions? Richard read carefully. These funds shall be distributed only after each beneficiary provides a written letter to my wife, acknowledging her sole authority over all remaining family assets and promising to respect her decisions regarding the same without interference or coercion. This is insane. Martha was on her feet now, too. He wasn't in his right mind. The cancer, the medications, they affected his judgment. I assure you Robert was completely competent when he made these changes, Richard said firmly. I have documentation from his physicians if necessary. When? James demanded. When did he make these changes? 3 weeks before his passing. After he knew we were helping with his affairs, David accused. He was paranoid delusional. I finally spoke, keeping my voice soft and confused. Children, please. Your father loved you all. $50,000 is still a generous gift. They turned on me like a pack. Generous. Martha laughed bitterly. Do you have any idea what this house alone is worth? $2 million minimum? And you're sitting there like you deserve it all. You've never worked a day in your life, James added viciously. Dad earned all of this. You just spent it. And now you'll probably blow it all on cruises and shopping. Sarah chimed in, apparently forgetting she wasn't even a blood relative. Richard tried to restore order. Please, everyone, let's remain civil. There's more to discuss. More, David said sarcastically. What more could there be? Mom gets everything we get scraps. What else is there to know? Your father left a personal letter to be read at this time, Richard said, pulling out an envelope. Another love letter to perfect Edna, Martha sneered. Richard opened the envelope and began to read in Robert's voice, coming through the formal words. To my children, I leave this message I have watched with growing concern, as your interest in my mortality has seemed to exceed your interest in my life. Your mother has been my partner, my best friend, and my greatest love for over 4 decades. She has earned every penny through her devotion, her sacrifice, and her unwavering support. If you cannot see her value, then perhaps $50,000 will help you reflect on your own. Bullshit, James exploded. Complete bullshit. He didn't write that. Mom got to him, David accused. She poisoned him against us. I want this contested, Martha announced. We'll prove he wasn't competent. We'll prove undue influence. That's when I made my first move. I reached into my purse ostensibly for tissues and subtly activated the recording app on my phone, making sure it was positioned to catch everything clearly. Mrs. Patterson, Richard said gently, are you all right? Would you like to take a break? I'm just so overwhelmed, I said, letting my voice quaver. I don't understand why they're so angry. And that's when the gloves truly came off. Because you're a gold digger, Martha shouted. You married Dad for his money and now you've stolen our inheritance. You probably hastened his death, James added. All those medications, who knows what you were really giving him. We should have had her evaluated. David told his siblings as if I wasn't there. Checked for competency. She's probably got dementia herself. I counted silently as they ranted. 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time they paused for breath, I had reached 18. 18 separate insults, accusations, and threats. All caught crystal clear on my recording devices. I said shakily, I need to go home. You're not going anywhere until we sort this out, James said, actually moving to block the door. James, Richard warned, I must ask you to step aside. Your mother is free to leave whenever she wishes. She's not leaving with our money, Martha said. We'll file injunctions. We'll tie this up in court for years. Go ahead, Richard said calmly. Your father anticipated this possibility. He set aside a separate fund specifically for legal defense of the will. Your mother won't spend a penny of her own money fighting you. This revelation set off another round of explosions. They were like spoiled children throwing tantrums, except these children were in their 30s and 40s, successful professionals who simply couldn't believe they weren't getting their way. I need to use the restroom, I announced, clutching my purse. Running away, Mom, David taunted. Can't handle the truth. I walked slowly to the door, counting steps as I used to count their interruptions. In the hallway, I could still hear them screaming at Richard, demanding copies of everything, threatening lawsuits, claiming their father was manipulated, that I was incompetent, that the will was fraudulent. In the bathroom, I looked at my phone. 23 minutes of perfect audio. Their greed, their contempt, their complete dismissal of me as a human being worthy of respect, all captured forever. But I wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning. I returned to the conference room to find them huddled together planning their attack. We need to move fast, James was saying. File for conservatorship before she can hide assets. I can get medical opinions, Martha added. My friend's husband is a psychiatrist. He'll say whatever we need. They didn't even stop talking when I entered. Mom's too stupid to understand legal documents anyway. David said, not bothering to lower his voice. We can probably get her to sign power of attorney if we word it right. I sat back down my recorders, capturing every damning word. Richard looked at me with concern, and something else, perhaps a glimmer of understanding. Is there anything else, Richard? I asked politely. Just some papers for you to sign acknowledging receipt of the will, he said. Nothing that changes anything, simply procedural. As I signed, my children continued their plotting, apparently convinced I was too stupid or too shocked to understand their schemes. They discussed lawyers' strategies, which judge might be sympathetic how to divide the assets once they wrested them from my control. Thank you, Richard, I said when I finished signing, for everything. He looked at me intently. Edna, if you need anything at all, please call me, day or night. She'll need a lawyer, all right, James said nastily. When we're done, she'll be lucky to keep her Social Security check. I stood to leave, and not one of my children said goodbye. Not one offered to walk me to my car. Not one showed a moment of concern for the woman who had given birth to them, raised them, loved them unconditionally their entire lives. At the door, I turned back. Your father would be so disappointed, I said quietly. Dad's dead, Martha replied coldly. And you're about to learn what it means to cross us. I walked out of that office with my head high and my recorders full. In the elevator, I finally allowed myself a small smile. They thought they were declaring war on a weak, stupid old woman. They had no idea what I had been recording, no idea what other recordings I already possessed, no idea what Robert and Richard had really planned. But they would learn. Oh, how they would learn. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Your husband was a wise man. Trust the process. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Tuesday, another meeting, another phase of Robert's plan. I drove home through the rain thinking about my children's transformation into these greedy strangers. When had it happened? How had I missed it? Or had Robert's illness simply revealed what had always been there? It didn't matter now. They had shown me who they were, believed every word they'd spoken. Now it was time to show them who I was. The war they wanted. They were about to get it, but not in any way they expected. The 5 days between the disastrous will reading and my next appointment with Richard became my education in my children's true natures. They thought they were laying siege to a confused old woman. Instead, they provided me with a masterclass in their own corruption. It started the very next morning. I was having my coffee when James arrived at 7 a.m. with 2 men in suits. Mom, he announced, walking in without knocking, this is Dr. Garrett Phillips, a geriatric specialist, and Mark Thornton, an attorney who specializes in elder law. I stayed seated at my kitchen table, noting how he didn't introduce me to them as if I were an object rather than a person. My phone was recording from its position next to my coffee cup. Good morning, I said pleasantly. Would anyone like coffee? Dr. Phillips, a thin man with cold eyes, immediately launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. Mrs. Patterson, your son, has expressed concerns about your ability to manage your affairs. I'd like to ask you some questions. Without my permission or consent, I asked mildly. Mom, please, James said with fake concern. We're only trying to help. Just answer his questions. I shifted slightly, ensuring my phone caught everything. Very well. What followed was the most insulting 20 minutes of my life. Dr. Phillips asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. He asked me who the president was. He asked me to remember 3 words and repeat them back, all while speaking to me as if I were a particularly slow kindergartner. Can you tell me what year it is, Mrs. Patterson? 2024. And what month? October. Do you know where you are right now? In my kitchen being interrogated by people my son brought without my consent. James shifted uncomfortably. Mom, no one's interrogating you. Then what would you call it, dear? Attorney Thornton stepped forward. Mrs. Patterson, we're simply trying to establish your capacity to handle complex financial matters. It's for your own protection. From whom exactly do I need protection? From those who might take advantage of your grief and confusion, James said smoothly. You're vulnerable right now, Mom. You need family looking out for your interests. I almost laughed at the irony. After they left with Dr. Phillips muttering about inconclusive results and needing further evaluation, I made myself a fresh cup of coffee and listened to the recording. Clear as day, I could hear James whispering to the doctor about finding anything, to establish incompetence. Martha's assault came that afternoon. She arrived with a moving truck. What's this? I asked, watching movers unload boxes into my garage. Just some things from my storage unit, she said breezily. Since you have all this space now, I figured you wouldn't mind. I watched them stack box after box in the garage Robert had kept meticulously organized. Martha, you can't just move your things into my home without asking. Our home, Mom, she corrected. This is the family home. Besides, you'll need help maintaining it. I'm planning to move into the guest suite temporarily, just to help you adjust. I don't need you to move in. She patted my hand condescendingly. You say that now, but wait until the first time you fall and can't get up. Wait until you forget to pay the electric bill. This is what's best. I removed my hand from under hers. Please have your things removed by tomorrow. Or what? She challenged. You'll call the police on your own daughter. That'll look great when we're establishing your mental state in court. After she left, I called a locksmith. Sometimes the old-fashioned solutions are best. David's approach was different but equally insidious. He and Sarah invited themselves to dinner on Saturday, arriving with groceries and insisting on cooking. We're worried you're not eating properly, Sarah said, unpacking enough food for a small army. Grief can make people forget to take care of themselves. As they cooked, I noticed them photographing everything the inside of my refrigerator, my medicine cabinet, which they had no business opening, even my mail on the counter. Building evidence for their competency case, no doubt. During dinner, David kept trying to get me to drink wine. Come on, Mom, it'll help you relax. I don't want any, thank you. Dad would want you to enjoy yourself. He pushed filling a glass anyway. I understood the game. Get me drunk, record me saying something confused or emotional. I took one sip and left the rest untouched. This medication, Sarah said, returning from another unauthorized exploration of my home, holding my arthritis prescription. Are you sure you're taking the right dosage? It seems like a lot. My doctor prescribed it, I said evenly. Still, mixing medications can be dangerous at your age, David said. Maybe we should talk to your doctor about adjusting things. They were laying groundwork, creating a narrative of a confused old woman who couldn't manage her medications, couldn't feed herself properly, needed constant supervision. But Sunday brought the most revealing performance yet. All three of them arrived together along with their spouses, and surprisingly, my grandchildren. I hadn't seen the grandkids since Robert's funeral. James's twins, Mark and Jennifer, both in college. Martha's son, Brian, a senior in high school. David's daughters, Emma and Chloe, aged 14 and 12. Grandma. Chloe ran to hug me, and for a moment my heart melted, until I heard David prompt her. Remember what we talked about, sweetie? Tell Grandma what you told me. Chloe pulled back, her face scrunched in concentration. I'm worried about you being alone, Grandma. What if something happens and no one's here? They were using my grandchildren as weapons. I'm fine, sweetheart, I assured her. I have my phone, my neighbors, my friends. But wouldn't it be better if Aunt Martha lived here? Brian asked, clearly coached. She could take care of you. The afternoon was orchestrated manipulation. The children had been briefed to express worry, to ask leading questions, to make comments about how big and empty the house felt. all while my children sat back and watched, occasionally prompting their kids for maximum effect. I served lunch playing the gracious grandmother while my recorders captured the entire disgusting display. At one point, while the kids were in the backyard, I overheard my children in the dining room. "She seems pretty sharp," James admitted grudgingly. "It's an act," Martha insisted. "She's putting on a show for the kids. I've seen it before with my elderly clients. They can fake competence for short periods." "We need to move faster," David said. "Every day she's in control is money potentially wasted or hidden." "The doctor said he'd write whatever we need," James assured them. "But it would be better if we had video evidence. Sarah, did you get anything?" "She wouldn't drink the wine," Sarah complained, and she noticed me checking her medications. "Keep pushing," Martha advised. "Everyone cracks eventually." They had no idea I was standing in the hallway listening to every word of my phone recording their conspiracy to destroy me. When they finally left, I stood in my empty house looking at the family photos lining the walls. There was James at his college graduation, Martha at her wedding, David holding his newborn daughter. When had those bright-eyed young people become these calculating strangers? But there was no time for sentiment. I had work to do. I spent Monday organizing everything I'd recorded, backing it up in multiple places. I transcribed key conversations, noting dates and times. I was building a case of my own, though they didn't know it yet. Richard had said to trust the process. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. That evening, as I was reviewing my recordings, the doorbell rang. It was Martha with a man I didn't recognize. "Mom, this is Dr. Harrison," she said, pushing past me. "He's here to do a wellness check." "At 8 o'clock at night?" I questioned. "Emergencies don't keep business hours," the man said, though he looked more like a bodybuilder than a doctor. "May I see your identification?" He flashed something quickly. "Now, Mrs. Patterson, I need you to come with me for evaluation." "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. "Mom, please don't make this difficult," Martha pleaded. "It's for your own good." I pulled out my phone, making sure they could see me dial. "I'm calling 911. The man stepped back immediately. "That won't be necessary. We can reschedule." They left quickly, but not before Martha hissed, "You can't fight us forever, Mother." I made sure my security system was armed and called Richard's emergency number. "They tried to take me somewhere," I told him. "Are you safe now?" "Yes, but Richard, I'm scared." It wasn't entirely an act. The lengths they were willing to go to were frightening. "Tomorrow, Edna. Everything changes tomorrow. Can you hold on until then?" "Yes," I said, though I kept a chair propped against my bedroom door that night. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in my best Navy suit, the one Robert always said made me look like a CEO. I gathered all my recordings, my transcripts, my evidence of their campaign against me. As I drove to Richard's office, I noticed James's car following me. Let him come. After today, everything would be different. Richard was waiting for me in his private office, not the conference room. "Edna, come in. We have much to discuss." As he closed the door, I saw James in the waiting room demanding to be included. "Let him wait," Richard said with satisfaction. "Now let me tell you what Robert really planned, and then let me hear what you've collected. Because if I know Robert and I know you, you haven't been sitting idle these past days." I smiled for the first time in days. "No, Richard, I most certainly have not." I pulled out my phone, my recordings, my evidence. "They interrupted me 18 times during your reading of the will. Would you like to hear what they've been saying since—" Richard's smile matched mine. "Very much so, because what I'm about to share with you will require exactly that kind of evidence." Outside, I could hear James arguing with the receptionist. Inside, Richard and I began planning the complete destruction of my children's schemes. They thought they were winning. They had no idea the trap was about to snap shut. Richard's private office felt like a sanctuary compared to the chaos of the past week. He poured me tea from an elegant china service, a ritual he'd shared with Robert during their decades of friendship. "Before we begin," he said, settling behind his mahogany desk, "I need to know you understand what Robert set in motion. This isn't just about protecting your assets, Edna. This is about teaching them a lesson they'll never forget. They're trying to have me declared incompetent," I said simply. "They've hired doctors, lawyers, even tried to abduct me last night." Richard's face darkened. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, I played him recordings, showed him transcripts, detailed every manipulation and threat. His expression grew increasingly grim as he listened to my children plotting my destruction. "My God," he muttered after hearing James discuss bribing a psychiatrist. "Robert was right. He saw this coming." "What exactly did Robert see?" Richard opened a locked drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "3 months before his diagnosis, your husband hired a private investigator." My teacup rattled against the saucer. "He what?" He'd noticed things. Small things at first. James asking detailed questions about your investment portfolio. Martha suggesting you were getting forgetful when you were sharp as ever. David photographing documents during a visit. Richard spread papers across his desk, surveillance photos, financial records, email printouts. The evidence painted a horrifying picture. "James has been in serious debt for 2 years, Richard explained. His lifestyle exceeds his income by roughly $200,000 annually. He's been borrowing from increasingly dangerous sources. But he drives a BMW, takes vacations to Europe. All funded by debt. He owes nearly $800,000, Edna. Some of it to people who don't accept bankruptcy as an answer." My stomach churned as Richard continued. "Martha's real estate business is a facade. She hasn't sold a property in 18 months. She's been running a Ponzi scheme with her clients' escrow funds, robbing Peter to pay Paul. She's 1 audit away from federal prison. And David's been embezzling from his company. Small amounts at first, but it's accelerated. He's stolen approximately $300,000 over 3 years. His employer discovered it last month. He's been given 90 days to make restitution or face prosecution." I stared at the evidence of my children's crimes. "So when Robert got sick, they saw their golden parachute. Your estate could solve all their problems, but only if they could get control of it." "Robert knew all this." Richard nodded gravely. "He knew, and he planned accordingly. The will reading was just the first act. He wanted them to reveal themselves completely, to show you who they really were." "Mission accomplished," I said bitterly. "Now comes phase 2. Richard pulled out another document. Robert established a trust, a very specific kind of trust that would only activate under certain conditions. I read the paperwork, my eyes widening. This is brilliant, devious, exactly what they deserve. Richard smiled. Robert called it his mirror trust. It reflects back exactly what they put in. Every action they take against you triggers a consequence for them. How does it work? First, we need your evidence to be officially documented. Then we need them to take one more step, make one more threat on record. After that, he smiled grimly. The trust activates, and they'll discover that every dollar they thought they were inheriting has conditions they'll never be able to meet. We spent the next 2 hours preparing affidavits, organizing evidence, creating an unassailable paper trail. Richard called in his assistant to notarize everything. By the time we finished, we had a comprehensive record of my children's attempts to destroy me. Now, Richard said, we need them to make their final move, and I think I know how to provoke it. He made a phone call. James. Yes, this is Richard Brennan. Your mother is here and she's asked me to arrange a family meeting. Yes, all of you. No, she's decided to discuss modifying the will arrangements. 2 o'clock, perfect. He hung up and winked at me. They'll come running like wolves to meet. Are you ready for the performance of your life? What do I need to do? Be exactly who they think you are. Confused, overwhelmed, ready to give in. Let them think they've won, and make sure you're recording everything. I went home to prepare, finding my driveway full of cars. My children were already there, circling like vultures. They'd let themselves in with spare keys I didn't know they had. "Mom," Martha exclaimed, emerging from my bedroom. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." "I had an appointment with Richard," I said, noting they'd been going through my closet. "Without telling us," James demanded. "Mom, that's exactly the kind of behavior that concerns us. You're making major decisions without family input." "Actually," I said, channeling every ounce of defeated exhaustion I could muster, "I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you're right. Maybe I can't handle all this alone." The change in atmosphere was instant. They exchanged triumphant looks, barely concealing their glee. "Oh, Mom," David said, suddenly gentle. "We're so glad you're seeing reason. We only want what's best for you." "Richard said you wanted to meet it too," Sarah interjected, "about modifying the will." "Yes." I sighed heavily. "I can't fight my own children. If you think you can manage things better, we'll take care of everything," James promised, already calculating his windfall. "You won't have to worry about a thing." The next 2 hours were a master class in manipulation. They surrounded me with false affection, fake concern, empty promises. Martha made lunch chattering about her plans for updating the house. James discussed investment strategies that would secure my future. David painted pictures of a lovely retirement community where I'd be surrounded by friends. All while my recorders captured their gloating, their disrespect, their naked greed. At 1:30, we drove to Richard's office in convoy, my children practically celebrating their victory. I sat in my car for a moment before entering, thinking of Robert. "Trust the process," he'd told Richard to tell me. I was about to find out why. The conference room was set up differently this time. A court reporter sat in the corner. A video camera was prominently displayed. 2 people I didn't recognize sat at the far end of the table. "What's all this?" James demanded. "Please, everyone sit," Richard said formally. "This meeting is being recorded for legal purposes. These are my associates, Ms. Chen and Mr. Williams, who specialize in elder law and financial crimes, respectively." "Financial crimes?" Martha squeaked. "A precaution," Richard assured them. "Now, Edna has indicated she wishes to discuss the will arrangements. Is that correct, Edna?" "Yes," I said weakly. "I've realized I need help. My children have convinced me I'm not capable of managing Robert's estate." "Excellent," James said, pulling out documents. "We've prepared some papers. Simple power of attorney forms, nothing dramatic." "I see," Richard said. "And what would this power of attorney entail?" "Just allowing us to manage Mom's assets," David explained. "Make investment decisions, handle the property, ensure she's cared for properly. By putting her in a home and selling everything," Ms. Chen said quietly. "Excuse me," Martha snapped. "I've reviewed your proposals," Ms. Chen continued. "The Sunrise Senior Living Facility you've chosen, the real estate contracts you've drafted, the investment restructuring that would liquidate everything within 90 days. "How do you know about that?" James demanded. "Your mother provided us with recordings," Mr. Williams said. "Very illuminating recordings." The color drained from their faces. "Now," Richard said, "let me explain what actually happens next. Edna." This was my moment. I straightened in my chair, letting the confused old woman mask drop completely. "I've recorded every conversation, every threat, every attempt to have me declared incompetent," I said clearly. "I have evidence of your conspiracy to steal my assets, your plans to institutionalize me, your attempts to bribe medical professionals." "Mom," David gasped. "I'm not finished," I continued. "I also know about your debts, James. Your Ponzi scheme, Martha. Your embezzlement, David. They sat frozen mouths open as I laid out everything the private investigator had found. Every crime, every lie, every betrayal. But here's the truly beautiful part, Richard interjected. Your father created what we call a mirror trust. Every action you've taken against your mother has triggered specific consequences. He pulled out a thick document. James, any attempt to have your mother declared incompetent results in your immediate disinheritance and triggers a notification to your creditors about your fraudulent loan applications. James went white. You can't do that. Already done, Mr. Williams confirmed. The notifications went out this morning. Martha. Richard continued. Your attempts to move into your mother's home and take control of her property have triggered an audit of your real estate transactions. The state licensing board was very interested in our findings. No, Martha whispered. And David, your participation in this scheme violates the terms of your employer's grace period. They've been notified that you've been using your promised inheritance as collateral for loans instead of making restitution. This is illegal, Sarah shrieked. You can't do this. Everything we've done is perfectly legal, Richard assured her. Unlike what you've attempted. Now, as for the $50,000 each of you would have inherited, he paused dramatically. That money is now permanently locked in a trust. It will only be released if you complete 1,000 hours of documented community service at organizations serving the elderly. You'll work in nursing homes, senior centers, Meals on Wheels. You'll see firsthand how vulnerable elderly people are treated by those who would exploit them. This is insane, James said weakly. This is justice, I corrected. Your father saw who you really were. He knew that his illness would bring out your true nature. Every penny you thought you'd steal from me has evaporated like morning mist. But we're your children, Martha pleaded. We made mistakes, yes, but we're family. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't try to have their mother committed. Family doesn't plan to steal her home. Family doesn't use their own children as weapons. What do you want from us? David asked desperately. Nothing, I said simply. I want absolutely nothing from any of you. You're free to deal with the consequences of your own actions, your debts, your crimes, your choices. Mom, please, James begged. I could go to prison. We all could. Yes, I agreed. You could. Or you could start that community service. Learn what it means to actually help people instead of preying on them. Your choice. Richard handed them each a packet. These are the terms of the Mirror Trust. Non-negotiable. You have 72 hours to decide whether to accept the community service option or face the full legal consequences of your actions. They stumbled out of the office like zombies, all their arrogance and cruelty evaporated. Sarah was crying. Martha looked catatonic. James and David seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. As the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. You did beautifully, Richard said. Robert would be proud. What happens now? Now, you go home to your house that no one will ever take from you. You live your life free from their manipulation. And they either learn the lesson Robert wanted to teach them, or they face the consequences. And if they choose the community service, then maybe they'll understand what it means to be vulnerable, to depend on the kindness of others, to see elderly people as human beings deserving of respect and dignity. I gathered my things, feeling lighter than I had in years. At the door, I turned back. Richard, thank you. And thank Robert for me. He knew you'd handle this perfectly. Richard smiled. He always said you were the strongest person he knew. Today you proved him right. As I drove home, I thought about the 1,000 hours each of them would have to serve if they wanted even a penny. 40 weeks of full-time work among the elderly they'd shown such contempt for. It was poetic justice of the highest order. My phone buzzed with text after text. Apologies, pleas, threats, promises. I deleted them all unread. They'd made their choices. Now they'd live with them. The sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway. My house stood solid and welcoming, no longer under siege. Tomorrow I'd change all the locks, install better security, maybe adopt that cat I'd been thinking about. Tonight, I'd pour a glass of Robert's favorite scotch, sit in his chair, and tell him all about how his plan worked perfectly. How the children we'd raised had revealed themselves as strangers, but how his foresight had protected me from their worst impulses. "You were right, my darling," I whispered to his photo. "I was stronger than they knew. Stronger than I knew." The war was over. I had won. And somewhere I was certain Robert was smiling. The first 48 hours after the Mirror Trust revelation were a symphony of chaos that I observed from the safety of my newly secured home. I'd had the locks changed, a state-of-the-art security system installed, and cameras positioned to cover every angle of my property. I wasn't taking any chances. The calls started within hours of the meeting. I let them all go to voicemail, each message a testament to my children's desperation. James, his voice cracking. "Mom, please. My creditors are calling. They're threatening to take the house, the cars, everything. I have kids, Mom. Your grandchildren. Please call me back." Martha sobbing. "How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter. The real estate board is launching a full investigation. I could lose my license. I could go to jail. Is that what you want?" David, angry and desperate. "This is insane. You've destroyed our lives. Sarah's left me. She's taken the girls. Says I'm a criminal. Are you happy now? Are you satisfied?" I listened to each message once, then archived them. Evidence, always evidence. Robert had taught me well through his example. On the second day, they came in person. I watched them on my new security monitors, huddled on my porch like lost children. They rang the doorbell, knocked, called out. James even tried his old key, seeming genuinely shocked when it didn't work. "I know you're in there, Mom," Martha shouted. "You can't hide forever." But I could, and I did. I sat in my kitchen drinking tea and reading a book while they exhausted themselves outside. After 2 hours, they finally left. Richard called that evening. "They've been to my office 3 times, he reported, demanding to see the trust documents, threatening to sue, claiming undue influence. "Let them," I said calmly. "They created this situation with their own greed." "There's something else," Richard said carefully. "They've hired Bradley Morrison." I knew the name. Bradley Morrison was Hartford's most aggressive estate attorney, known for breaking trusts and winning ugly family battles. "Good for them," I said. "What can he actually do?" "Against the Mirror Trust, nothing. Robert and I spent 2 years making it ironclad. But Edna, he'll try to break you personally. Claim mental incompetence, emotional manipulation, anything to invalidate the trust." Then I suppose I should be prepared. What I wasn't prepared for was Morrison's first move. He didn't attack me directly. Instead, he went after my grandchildren. The letters arrived by courier 3 days after the trust meeting. Formal legal documents on Morrison's letterhead. Each of my grandchildren was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming I had destroyed their families and futures. My hands shook as I read the complaints. Mark and Jennifer James's twins claimed their college funds were gone because of my vindictive actions. Brian Martha's son stated he'd been forced to withdraw from private school. Emma and Chloe David's daughters wrote heart-wrenching accounts of their parents fighting and their mother leaving. Of course, the letters were clearly written by Morrison, not children. But the strategy was clear: use my grandchildren as weapons to break my resolve. I called Richard immediately. "Can they do this?" "They can file anything. he said grimly. Whether it has merit is another matter. But Edna, this is emotional warfare. They're betting you'll cave rather than fight your grandchildren in court. That night I sat with photo albums looking at pictures of those same grandchildren. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer vacations at the lake. When had their parents' greed infected them too? Or was Morrison manipulating them just as their parents had tried to manipulate me? The next morning brought another surprise. A knock at my door revealed a young woman with kind eyes and a press badge. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm Julia Chen from the Hartford Courant. I'm investigating a story about elder financial abuse. I understand you've had some experience with this." I almost closed the door in her face. Then I reconsidered. "Who told you about my situation?" "I can't reveal my sources, but I've been tracking several cases where adult children attempt to take control of their parents' assets. Your case is particularly interesting because of how you fought back." I invited her in for coffee, my recorder running as always. Over the next 2 hours, I told her everything. The attempted institutionalization, the bribes to doctors, the conspiracy to steal my home. I played her selected recordings, showed her documents, laid out the entire sordid tale. "This is incredible," Julia said. "Would you be willing to go on record?" "Every word," I confirmed. "But I want copies of everything before you publish." "Of course. Mrs. Patterson, what you've done here, it could help so many others in similar situations." "That's the only reason I'm talking to you," I said. "If one elderly person reads this and realizes they're not alone, not helpless, then it's worth it." Julia's article ran 3 days later, front page of the Sunday edition, "The Widow Who Fought Back, a Hartford Story of Greed, Betrayal, and Justice." The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang constantly with calls from other elderly people facing similar situations. Letters poured in sharing stories of children trying to take control of feeling helpless and alone. But more importantly for my situation, the article caught the attention of the state's attorney's office. "Mrs. Patterson," the prosecutor Janet Williams said, when she called, "We've been building cases against several individuals mentioned in the article. Your evidence could be crucial. Would you be willing to cooperate?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. That's when things got interesting. You see, Bradley Morrison had made a critical error. In his aggressive pursuit of my assets, he'd filed documents claiming my children had my best interests at heart, that they were trying to protect me from my own incompetence. But those claims were directly contradicted by the recordings I'd made of them plotting against me. Morrison had unknowingly opened the door for perjury charges. The meeting at the state's attorney's office was surreal. I sat at a conference table surrounded by prosecutors and investigators playing recording after recording. They took notes, exchanged glances, occasionally asked for clarification. This one, Prosecutor Williams said after hearing James discuss bribing Dr. Phillips, "This is conspiracy to commit fraud, a felony." And this, another prosecutor added after Martha's recorded admission about her real estate scheme, connects to a case we're already building. She's been stealing from elderly clients for years. "The embezzlement is federal," a third noted about David's confession. "We'll need to coordinate with the FBI." I sat there watching my children's crimes stack up like building blocks, each one adding to potential prison sentences. "Mrs. Patterson," Williams said finally, "with your permission, we'd like to use these recordings as evidence in criminal proceedings." "You have it," I said firmly. "All of it." As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Mom, please. Morrison says we can challenge the trust if you're working with prosecutors. This is your last chance to make this right." I texted back for the first time since the trust meeting. "You had 41 years of chances. You chose greed over family. Live with it." That evening, Richard called with news. "They've accepted the community service option." "All of them?" "All of them." Morrison must have explained their alternative was prison. They start Monday at various elder care facilities around the state. And the lawsuits from the grandchildren, withdrawn. Morrison knows he can't win against the evidence you've collected. He's cutting his losses. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt empty. My children would spend the next year working in nursing homes and senior centers, hopefully learning empathy they should have had naturally. But our family was destroyed. Then the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera to see Emma and Chloe David's daughters standing alone on my porch. No parents, no lawyers, just two scared young girls. I opened the door cautiously. "Girls, where are your parents?" "Mom left us with Aunt Patricia," Emma said, her voice small. "Dad's at lawyer meetings all day. We wanted to see you, Grandma." "Nobody knows we're here," Chloe added quickly. "We took an Uber." I looked at these girls 14 and 12 caught in their parents' war. They hadn't asked for any of this. "Come in," I said gently. "I'll make hot chocolate." As they sat at my kitchen table, the same table where their father had plotted against me, I saw Robert in their faces. His eyes in Emma, his stubborn chin in Chloe. "Grandma," Emma said finally, "we're sorry. About the letters. Mr. Morrison made us sign them. Said if we didn't, Dad would go to jail for sure." "We didn't understand what was happening," Chloe added. "Everyone was yelling and crying, and Mom packed us up and left." "I know, sweethearts," I said. "None of this is your fault." "Dad says you destroyed our family," Emma said quietly. "But Mom says Dad did it himself. We don't know what to believe." I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults make bad choices. Your father made some bad choices about money. I had to protect myself. That doesn't mean I don't love you. "Can we still visit you?" Chloe asked hopefully. "Of course," I said, my heart breaking a little. "You're always welcome here." They stayed for 2 hours. We baked cookies, looked at photo albums, carefully avoided talking about their parents. When their Aunt Patricia came to collect them, looking embarrassed and uncomfortable, the girls hugged me tightly. "We love you, Grandma," Emma whispered, "no matter what." After they left, I sat in Robert's chair and cried for the first time since this whole ordeal began. Not for myself, but for those girls, for all the grandchildren caught in their parents' greed and its consequences. My phone rang. Richard again. "Edna, I have one more thing to tell you about the trust," he said. Robert included a provision we didn't discuss at the meeting. "What kind of provision?" "If your children complete their community service, truly complete it with documented proof of genuine engagement and attitude change, there's a second trust. One that would help with their legal troubles, their debts. Not enough to save them entirely, but enough to give them a fresh start." "He still hoped they'd change," I said softly. "He did. He said you'd know if they truly learned anything or were just going through the motions. The decision to activate that second trust is entirely yours." 1,000 hours is a long time, I mused. People can change in 1,000 hours. "Or they can stay exactly the same," Richard cautioned. "Robert wanted you to have options, not obligations." After we hung up, I made myself a simple dinner and thought about second chances. Robert had always been more optimistic about people than I was. Even planning their punishment, he'd included hope for redemption. My children would start their community service on Monday. For 40 weeks, they'd work with the elderly, the vulnerable, the forgotten. They'd either learn empathy or confirm their selfishness. But I'd already learned my lesson. I'd learned I was stronger than I knew. I'd learned that family isn't about blood, but about respect and love. I'd learned that Robert's faith in me was justified. The tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Criminal investigations, community service, broken families trying to heal. I would be here in my home, strong and secure, waiting to see if my children could find their way back to being people worth knowing. The trap had been sprung. Justice had been served. But the story wasn't over. It never really is with family. 1 year later, I stood in the activities room of Hartford Senior Center, watching Martha lead a group of elderly residents in an art therapy session. Her designer clothes were long gone, replaced by simple scrubs and comfortable shoes. Her perfectly manicured nails were short and unpolished, but it was her eyes that showed the real change. Gone was the calculating coldness I'd seen in Richard's conference room. In its place was something I hadn't seen since she was young, genuine warmth. "Mrs. Chen, that's beautiful," Martha encouraged an elderly woman painting shakily. "The colors you've chosen are perfect. Would you like me to help steady your hand?" The administrator, Patricia Morgan, stood beside me. "She's been our best volunteer," she said quietly. "The residents adore her. She comes in even on days she's not scheduled." Really, I couldn't hide my surprise. "She spent the first month crying in the bathroom between shifts," Patricia admitted. "But something shifted around month 3. She started really seeing our residents as people, not just obligations." I watched Martha gently guide Mrs. Chen's hand, laughing at something the elderly woman said. My daughter, who'd tried to have me institutionalized, was now tenderly caring for strangers. "Has she ever mentioned me?" I asked. Patricia smiled softly. "Every day. She tells residents about recipes you taught her, shows them pictures of grandchildren on her phone. Says she's working here to make amends for the worst mistake of her life." I left without Martha seeing me. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. My next stop was Meals on Wheels, where David worked in the kitchen and delivery service. The boy who'd photographed my medicine cabinet now carefully portioned medications into delivery bags for homebound seniors. "He's meticulous," his supervisor, Ron Martinez, told me. "Never makes an error. And when he delivers, he doesn't just drop off the food. He checks on people, makes sure they're okay, reports any concerns." Through the kitchen window, I watched David joke with other volunteers while carefully checking each meal against dietary restriction lists. He looked older, grayer, but also somehow lighter. "Last week," Ron continued, "he stayed 2 hours with Mr. Peterson because the man was confused and had missed his medication. David called the man's daughter, waited for her to arrive, made sure everything was documented. Didn't clock the extra time, just said it was the right thing to do." James was hardest to find. He worked at 3 different facilities to accumulate hours faster, desperate to access the potential second trust. But when I finally tracked him down at Sunrise Memory Care, what I saw stopped me cold. He sat in the common room, his expensive suit replaced by jeans and a polo shirt, playing piano for a group of dementia patients. Old songs from their youth melodies that brought light to confused eyes. A woman who hadn't spoken in weeks was humming along. "He has a gift," the facility director, Dr. Rachel Adams, said beside me. "These patients respond to him in ways they don't with others. He's patient, never frustrated when they forget his name minutes after meeting him." "How long has he been doing this?" "He started just checking boxes, doing minimum interaction. But there's this one resident, Mr. Jameson, former Yale professor like your son. They started talking about economics, or rather the same conversation about economics over and over. And somewhere in those repetitions, James stopped seeing the disease and started seeing the person. I stayed hidden watching my son's gentle patience with people who would forget him the moment he left. The son who'd called me too stupid to understand legal documents now spoke softly to confused elderly, never showing irritation when they asked the same question repeatedly. That evening, I met with Prosecutor Williams for an update on the criminal cases. "Your daughter Martha has made full restitution to her clients," she reported. "Sold everything she owned, moved into a studio apartment, set up payment plans for the rest. With the community service and cooperation, we're recommending probation instead of jail time." And David? His company was impressed by his initiative in making amends. They've agreed to a settlement that includes garnished wages but continued employment. He'll be paying it back for years, but he'll avoid prison. James? Williams sighed. His case is more complex. Some of his creditors were less than legal themselves. We've managed to negotiate settlements with the legitimate ones. The others seem to have decided to write off the debts, rather than expose their own operations to scrutiny. So they're all avoiding prison. Assuming they complete the community service satisfactorily, yes. Your evidence helped us build cases, but it also showed they were capable of change. The DA believes in rehabilitation when possible. I nodded slowly. So do I suppose. That night Richard called with his monthly check-in. Have you decided about the second trust? I've been watching them, I admitted. They're different, Richard. Or maybe they're who they used to be before greed poisoned them. But I don't know if it's real or just another performance. There's one way to find out, he suggested. Talk to them. The next Monday marked exactly 1 year since the trust meeting. I'd planned to spend it quietly at home, but fate had other ideas. My doorbell rang at noon, revealing all 3 of my children standing on my porch. No lawyers, no spouses, just them. We're not here to ask for anything, James said quickly, seeing my expression. It's been a year. We wanted you to know we understand now. I let them in, noting how they waited to be invited rather than barging in as before. We sat in the living room, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Martha broke first. Mom, I've written you 100 letters, thrown them all away. How do you apologize for trying to destroy your own mother? You don't, I said simply. You change. We're trying, David said. Every day at the facilities I see what we almost did to you. These people trust us with their lives, their dignity, and we were going to steal yours. The money seemed so important, James added quietly. Dad was gone, we were drowning in our own mistakes, and there you were with everything we thought we needed. We turned you into an obstacle instead of seeing you as our mother. What changed? I asked. They exchanged glances and Martha answered. There's this woman at the senior center, Mrs. Patterson. Same last name as you. She has dementia, thinks I'm her daughter sometimes. One day she was crying, terrified her children were going to put her away, take her house. She was living our plan, Mom, living what we were going to do to you. I held her while she sobbed, and all I could think was how we'd nearly broken you the same way. Mr. Jameson at the memory care unit, James said. He has lucid moments where he knows his son is stealing from him, but can't prove it, can't fight back. The terror in his eyes. God, Mom, is that how you felt? Yes, I said simply, exactly like that. David wiped his eyes. I deliver meals to a woman whose daughter controls everything. Tells her she's too stupid to manage money, too feeble to live alone. The daughter doesn't visit, just cashes the Social Security checks. Every week this woman asks me if I think she's stupid. Every week I tell her she's not, and I think about you. We sat in silence for a moment before I made my decision. Richard told me about the second trust, I said. Your father left provision for helping with your debts if you truly learned from this experience. We're not asking for it, James said quickly. We're handling our problems. It's not your responsibility. No, I agreed. It's not. But your father believed in second chances. He believed people could change, could redeem themselves. Do you? Martha asked softly. Do you believe we've changed? I looked at my children, really looked at them. They were different, there was no denying that. Humbled, certainly. Chastened. But truly changed. I believe you've learned that actions have consequences, I said carefully. I believe you've seen the humanity in people you previously dismissed. Whether that's genuine change or just adaptation to circumstances, only time will tell. Fair enough, David said. More than fair considering. I'll make you a deal, I said, surprising myself. Complete your 1,000 hours. not just the minimum, but with genuine engagement. Then continue volunteering 1 day a month for another year. Not for money, not for the trust, but because it's right. Do that, and we'll discuss the second trust. And our relationship, Martha asked hopefully. Is there any chance of rebuilding that? That's a different kind of work, I said. Trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures, but with small, consistent actions over time. You could start by actually calling on my birthday, visiting without agenda, being the children I raised before money clouded your judgment. They stayed for another hour, the conversation careful but not hostile. When they left, each hugged me tentatively as if I might break or disappear. I hugged them back, feeling the ghost of the children they'd been hoping for the adults they might become. That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time it was my grandchildren, all 5 of them with flowers and a cake. Happy 1 year of freedom, Grandma. Chloe announced, the others laughing. I'd stayed in touch with all of them over the year, keeping that relationship separate from their parents' journey. They'd suffered enough from adult failures. We know it's been hard, Emma said as we gathered around the dining table. But we want you to know we're proud of you, for standing up for yourself, for being strong, and for still loving us even when our parents went crazy, Brian added. Love doesn't stop just because people disappoint you, I said, cutting the cake. It just becomes more complicated. We celebrated quietly, talking about school and friends' plans for the future. Mark was graduating next spring. Jennifer was considering law school, the kind that helps people, not hurts them. She specified. Brian had started volunteering at the senior center with his mother, trying to understand what went wrong. Emma and Chloe were still navigating their parents' separation, but they were doing it with grace beyond their years. As they prepared to leave, Mark pulled me aside. Grandma, I've been thinking, when I graduate, instead of the big party Mom and Dad want to throw, could we do something simple? Maybe volunteer at one of the places they work. Make it about giving back instead of showing off. I hugged him tightly. Your grandfather would have loved that idea. After they left, I sat in Robert's chair with his photo in my hands. They're finding their way back, I told him. Slowly, painfully, but they're trying. You were right to leave that second door open. The house felt peaceful in a way it hadn't in over a year. Not empty, but full of possibility. My children were learning who they really were beneath their greed. My grandchildren were choosing different paths. And I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. The phone rang. Julia Chen from the newspaper. Mrs. Patterson, I wanted you to know your story has inspired legislation. The state assembly is considering a bill making it harder to declare elderly people incompetent without extensive documentation and oversight. They're calling it the Patterson Protocol. I don't need my name on it, I said. But you deserve recognition for what you've done. You've helped countless seniors protect themselves. After we hung up, I made tea and stood at my window looking out at the garden Robert and I had planted together. It had been neglected during his illness and the chaos that followed, but now it was thriving again. New growth among the established plants, fresh life sprouting from deep roots. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of year 2. My children would complete their required service soon, then face the challenge of continuing voluntarily. The criminal cases would resolve. The grandchildren would keep growing. Life would move forward. But tonight I raised my teacup to the empty chair across from me. We did it, Robert. We protected what mattered, taught the lessons that needed teaching, and somehow kept the door open for redemption. Not bad for a stupid old woman, wouldn't you say? The house settled around me, solid and secure, filled with memories, but also with hope. My children had interrupted me 18 times during the will reading, trying to silence and dismiss me. But I'd had the last word. And it wasn't goodbye, it was prove yourselves worthy of a second chance. Some would, some might not. But I'd be here strong and sovereign in my own life, ready to forgive those who earned it while never forgetting the lessons learned when greed tried to destroy our family. The best revenge I'd discovered wasn't destruction. It was forcing people to face who they really were and giving them the chance to become who they should have been all along. Robert had known that. It had just taken me a year to understand his final gift wasn't just protecting me, it was saving our children from themselves. Time would tell if they were worth saving. But that's tomorrow's story. Tonight I was just Edna Patterson, widow mother, grandmother and survivor. Stronger than anyone had guessed, wiser than I'd known, and finally truly free. As Robert always said I would be. Dear viewers, have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? How did you find the strength to protect yourself while keeping the door open for redemption? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to hear more stories about families facing difficult truths and finding their way back to each other. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with family financial conflicts. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, your worth isn't measured by what others can take from you, but by the strength you find within yourself when tested. Stay strong, set boundaries, but always leave room for genuine redemption. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.